The chamber smelled of ozone and old metal, a scent that never left the coalition assembly no matter how many centuries passed. Hundreds of alien delegates sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling like the inside of a shell, their voices blending into a low hum of clicks, chirps, and rolling vowels. Light from 3 distant suns poured through the high glass dome above, painting strange colors across the floor. It was in this noise, this old and confident noise, that Daniel Reyes walked forward alone. He was not a soldier. He wore a plain gray suit, nothing fancy, nothing meant to impress. His shoes clicked against the polished floor with each step, and the sound seemed too small for such a large room. Around him, towering delegates twice his height watched with mild curiosity, the way one might watch an insect crawl across a table. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 15 years ago, and in that time it had built no great fleet, claimed no great territory, and won no great wars. To most of the beings in this room, humans were simply new, small, and unimportant. Reyes reached the center platform and activated the translation node clipped to his collar. He did not clear his throat. He did not hesitate. "Members of the council," he said, his voice carrying cleanly through the chamber, "I come with a warning, not a request." A ripple of amusement passed through the crowd. Somewhere near the back, a group of insectoid thrall delegates rubbed their forelimbs together, producing a dry, rattling sound that was their version of laughter. Reyes ignored it. "For the past 8 months," he continued, "the Korvath Dominion has been raiding our frontier colonies. 6 settlements have been attacked. 2 have been wiped out entirely. We have sent formal complaints to this council 11 times. 11 times we were told to be patient." A tall, elegant oven delegate near the front rose slightly from her seat. Her skin shimmered like polished stone, and her voice was smooth, almost bored. "Patience is a virtue even young species must learn, Ambassador Reyes. The Korvath are a recognized power. Border disputes are common. Surely your colonies can withstand a few raids while proper channels are followed." "A few raids," Reyes repeated quietly. 3,000 civilians are dead, children among them." The chamber grew quiet for a moment, though not out of sympathy. It was the quiet of an audience waiting for something more entertaining to happen. A Thrall elder finally spoke, its voice clicking sharply through the translator. "What is it you wish from us, human? A fleet? Humanity does not even possess a fleet worth defending itself with, let alone one this council should divert resources toward. You have no significant military history, no allies of consequence. You ask us to spend resources protecting a species that cannot protect itself." More laughter followed, louder this time, spreading through several rows. Reyes stood still, his hands folded behind his back, his face calm. He had expected this. He had known, walking in, that the council would not listen. He had come anyway because there were rules to this. There were steps that had to be taken, records that had to be made so that later no one could say humanity had not tried to warn them first. "I am not asking you to send a fleet," Reyes said finally, once the noise settled. "I am informing you, formally and on record, that humanity will act to protect its people, with or without this council's blessing." The oven delegate laughed softly, a musical mocking sound. "And how exactly do you intend to do that? With farming vessels and cargo haulers?" Reyes let the question hang in the air for a moment. Then he answered simply, "You will see soon enough." The council chairman, an old and heavy-set being from a species Reyes did not recognize, raised a limb for silence. "Ambassador Reyes, this council does not respond well to threats, veiled or otherwise. If you have grievances with the Korvath Dominion, take them through the proper diplomatic channels. This session is concluded." Reyes did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply nodded once, turned, and began walking back toward the exit. Behind him, the laughter continued, delegates leaning toward one another, whispering about the strange, stubborn little species that dared to lecture the galaxy on threats it clearly could not back up. At the door, Reyes paused. He turned his head slightly, just enough for his voice to carry back into the chamber one final time. "We won't be asking again." Then he left, the heavy doors sealing shut behind him with a deep, final sound. Far beyond the assembly station, in the cold silence of deep space, the Corveth Dominion had already made its decision. Grand Marshal Threxa Vol, commander of 3 battle fleets, had been watching the council session through a private feed, and he found the humans' warning almost charming in its foolishness. Humanity had no standing army worth mentioning, no allies willing to intervene, and now, thanks to the council's public dismissal, no diplomatic cover either. It was, Vol thought, the perfect opportunity. He gave the order that night. 3 fleets, more than 400 warships combined, began charging their jump drives, setting a course for the human frontier. The Dominion had grown tired of small raids. It was time to finish what they had started, to erase humanity's colonies from the star charts entirely, and to remind the galaxy exactly why the Corvath Dominion was a power to be feared. None of them noticed the quiet patrol ships already positioned along their intended path, watching, recording, and waiting. Humanity had heard the laughter in that chamber. It had expected nothing less, and it had already begun preparing for exactly this moment, long before Daniel Reyes ever stepped onto that platform to deliver a warning no one wanted to believe. Grand Marshal Threxa Vol stood in the war room of his flagship, arms crossed behind his back, watching star charts shift and update in real time. The room was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep of a status update. He liked the silence. It gave him time to think, and right now, he was thinking about how easy this campaign was going to be. Vol had studied humanity carefully before this operation began. He had read every report the Dominion scouts had gathered over the years. Humans, according to those reports, relied on outdated weapons, poorly coordinated defense grids, and a military structure still divided by old national loyalties left over from their home planet. They had no unified fleet doctrine, no serious combat experience against an advanced species. To Vol, humanity was less a threat and more an inconvenience, a stubborn pest that occasionally bit back but could never truly fight. 3 fleets moved with him now, spread across a wide formation as they crossed into human space. The first fleet, under his direct command, aimed straight for the colony world of Haldes. The second, led by a younger but eager commander named Dresk, moved toward New Meridian. The third stayed in reserve near the border, ready to reinforce wherever resistance proved troublesome, though Vol doubted resistance would prove troublesome at all. The frontier systems came into view on the main screen, quiet and unremarkable. Small moons, a few mining stations, scattered human ships that scattered further the moment Dominion sensors locked onto them. Vol allowed himself a small, satisfied sound, something between a growl and a laugh. "They run," said his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered officer named Threll adjacent in build but fully Corvath in blood, standing beside him. Just as the reports said they would. "Cowards," Vol replied simply. It seems the human ambassador's warning was nothing more than desperate noise. On Haldes, sirens wailed through underground shelters as colonists rushed to safety. The colony's small defense fleet, only 12 ships strong, launched to meet the incoming Dominion forces, but they did not engage directly. Instead, they fired a few scattered shots, enough to seem like resistance, and then began retreating deeper into the system, drawing Dominion attention away from the planet itself. Vol watched the retreat with growing confidence. "They are trying to lure us away from the colony to buy time for evacuation," he said. "Predictable. Let them run. Dresk's fleet will finish New Meridian while we take our time here." What Vol did not know, what none of the Dominion officers realized, was that the retreating ships were not running in panic. They were running with purpose, following a precise course that had been planned months in advance. Each maneuver, each seemingly desperate jump, was pulling the pursuing Dominion forces steadily toward a specific region of space marked on human star charts as the Hollow Reach. An old, abandoned asteroid belt, once used for mining operations before the resources ran dry. Aboard one of those retreating human ships, a young pilot named Ryan Cole gripped his controls tightly, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ship's climate control. He was not a career soldier. Like many in the Frontier Patrol, he had signed up after the first Corvette raids hit his home colony, trading his old life as a transport pilot for something far more dangerous. "They're still following," said his co-pilot, a calm woman named Alice Dunmore, watching the sensor readout. "Right on schedule." "Doesn't feel like much of a plan when you're the bait," Ryan muttered, adjusting course slightly as instructed by the mission plan. "It's not bait," Alice said. "It's a leash. We're walking them exactly where we want them to go." Back on Vol's flagship, reports continued rolling in from Dresk's fleet at New Meridian. The colony's defenses were similarly light, similarly quick to retreat, drawing the Second Fleet further along its own predetermined path. Vol found the pattern mildly interesting but not concerning. Two fleets, chasing scattered defenders, spreading deeper into human territory. It matched exactly what the old scouting reports predicted: a young, disorganized species incapable of coordinated defense. "Order the reserve fleet to advance as well," Vol commanded. "If the frontier folds this easily, there is no reason to hold anything back. We will crush their capacity to resist in a single, decisive campaign." His second-in-command hesitated only slightly before relaying the order. Something about the ease of it nagged quietly at the back of his mind, a small itch of doubt he could not quite explain. He pushed it aside. Vol was a decorated commander with decades of successful campaigns behind him. If he saw no danger here, then surely there was none. The reserve fleet began moving, joining the other two as they pressed deeper into the Hollow Reach region, drawn forward by retreating ships, scattered resistance, and the quiet overconfidence of a commander who had already decided this war was won before it truly began. Far behind Dominion lines, in a heavily shielded command bunker on Earth, military officials watched the same star charts with very different expressions. 3 Dominion fleets, converging exactly where they were meant to converge. Months of planning, secrecy, and preparation were finally coming to their intended point. No one in the room celebrated yet. There was still work to be done, and much could still go wrong. But for the first time since the raids began, there was a quiet, careful sense that humanity's long, patient preparation was about to be tested exactly as planned. The Hollow Reach waited, silent and still, for the fleets that did not yet know they were walking straight into a trap built specifically for them. 10 years before Daniel Reyes ever stood in front of the Coalition Council, a small group of engineers gathered in an unmarked facility buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. There were no cameras, no press releases, no public records of what they were building. The project did not officially exist. Its funding moved through a dozen disguised channels, hidden inside budgets for asteroid mining research and deep space communication arrays. Only a handful of people in the entire government knew its true purpose. The lead engineer on the project was a quiet woman named Grace Holloway, a former orbital defense specialist who had spent years studying how alien fleets fought, moved, and communicated, gathered from the earliest data exchanges after first contact. She had come to one uncomfortable conclusion early on: humanity would eventually be tested, and when that day came, no one else in the galaxy would step in to help. If humans wanted to survive, they would have to prepare alone, quietly and completely. "They will not take us seriously until we make them," Grace had said during one of the earliest planning meetings, standing in front of a star map of the frontier systems. "So we build something they will never see coming." The location she chose was the Hollow Reach, an old asteroid mining belt that had been stripped of resources decades earlier and mostly abandoned. It was remote, unremarkable, and most importantly, completely unmonitored by any major power. Over the following years, disguised construction ships slipped into the region under the cover of supposed mining surveys, slowly turning the dead rock field into something else entirely. Thousands of automated weapon platforms were embedded into the asteroids themselves, hidden beneath layers of natural rock and dust, so they would appear as nothing more than harmless debris to any passing scanner. Gravity disruption mines were scattered throughout key choke points, designed to scramble ship formations and cripple engines the moment enemy vessels entered specific zones. Relay jamming satellites, disguised as broken mining equipment, were placed to cut communication and navigation systems the instant they detected a hostile fleet signature. It had taken nearly a decade to finish, and even now only a small circle of people fully understood what the Hollow Reach had become. To any outside observer, it remained exactly what it appeared to be: a dead, useless stretch of space that nobody wanted. Now, as the Corvath Dominion's 3 fleets pushed deeper into the Reach chasing the retreating human patrol ships, that decade of quiet work was finally about to be tested. Aboard the lead human command ship, hidden far from Dominion sensors inside a shielded pocket at the edge of the Reach, Grace Holloway watched the enemy formations creep closer to the activation threshold on her display. Beside her stood Fleet Commander Owen Baxter, a steady, broad-shouldered man who had spent the last 3 years training for this exact moment. "They're entering the outer field now," Grace said quietly. "Copy that," Owen replied. "All units hold position. Let them come further in before we spring it." On Grand Marshal Vall's flagship, confidence remained high. His sensors showed nothing unusual, only scattered asteroids and old mining debris exactly as their scouting reports had described. The retreating human ships continued pulling back deeper into the field, seemingly desperate to escape. "They are trapping themselves in a dead zone," Vall said, almost amused. "There is nowhere left for them to run." He did not know how right and how wrong those words truly were. Grace watched the final Dominion ships cross the last threshold line on her display. She turned to Owen and gave a single, small nod. "Activate the Reach," Owen said calmly into the comm system. Across the Hollow Reach, thousands of disguised weapon platforms shifted from dormant to active in the same instant. Layers of rock and dust that had hidden them for years cracked apart as targeting systems locked onto every Dominion ship within range. Gravity disruption mines detonated in precise, staggered patterns, sending sudden bursts of distorted space rippling through the enemy formations. Aboard Vall's flagship, alarms blared without warning. Multiple contacts detected, weapons platforms active across the entire field. "Communications are failing," Vall's second-in-command shouted, gripping his console as the ship lurched violently to one side. Vall stared at the screen, disbelief spreading across his face as ship after ship in his formation reported collisions, engine failures, and total sensor blackouts. 2 of his cruisers, blinded and disoriented by the gravity disruptions, drifted directly into each other, their hulls tearing apart in silent explosions. "This is not possible," Vall muttered, watching his carefully organized fleet dissolve into chaos within seconds. This region was scouted. There was nothing here. But there had been something here all along, hidden and waiting for exactly this moment. As his ships scrambled to reorganize amid the growing confusion, a new wave of threats appeared on what remained of their sensors. Sleek, dark shapes that had been completely invisible until now began decloaking throughout the Reach, human stealth cruisers designed specifically to counter Corvath detection systems, built using a decade of gathered intelligence on Dominion technology. The stealth cruisers moved with precise, practiced coordination, targeting command ships first, cutting off communication between the scattered fleet elements before turning their focus toward engines and weapon systems. It was not a chaotic, desperate battle. It was calculated, controlled, and devastating. Grand Marshal Vall, who had entered the Hollow Reach expecting to crush a disorganized species incapable of coordinated defense, now found himself trapped inside a kill zone built specifically, patiently, and precisely to counter everything the Korvath Dominion believed made them unstoppable. For the first time in his long, decorated career, Vol felt something unfamiliar settle over him as he watched his fleet collapse around him. It was not simple worry. It was the cold, dawning realization that humanity's warning in that coalition chamber had not been an empty threat at all. Smoke and debris drifted silently through the hollow reach, catching faint light from distant stars as what remained of 3 Korvath battle fleets struggled to make sense of the disaster unfolding around them. Ships that had entered the region in tight, disciplined formations now floated in scattered, broken clusters, some drifting powerless, others still under fire from human stealth cruisers moving between the asteroid fields like ghosts. Grand Marshal Vol gripped the edge of his command console, watching status reports flicker across his screen faster than he could process them. Nearly a third of his personal fleet was already disabled or destroyed. Worse, attempts to contact Dresk's fleet near New Meridian and the reserve fleet further behind had returned nothing but static. Jump drives are not responding, his second-in-command reported, voice tight with controlled panic. The jamming field is not just blocking communications, it is locking down our navigation systems as well. Vol's mind raced through every tactical option available to him. Retreat was no longer simple. His ships could not calculate safe jump coordinates while blind and disoriented, and any attempt to force a blind jump risked tearing a vessel apart mid-transition. They were trapped, not by walls or weapons alone, but by the very laws of physics turned against them through careful human engineering. Concentrate remaining ships into defensive formation, Vol ordered, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the chaos around him. We hold position and fight our way out if we must. But holding position proved far more difficult than issuing the order. Human stealth cruisers continued picking apart the scattered Dominion formation with disciplined precision. Rather than pursuing a full, destructive slaughter, human commanders focused their strikes carefully, targeting engines, weapon systems, and communication arrays rather than aiming for the kind of indiscriminate destruction Vol had expected from a desperate, cornered species. Aboard one of the lead stealth cruisers, Fleet Commander Owen Baxter watched the battle unfold with quiet focus. "Remind all units," he said calmly into the comm system. "Disable, don't destroy where possible. We want survivors who can carry a message home." It was not mercy born from weakness. It was calculated strategy. A completely annihilated fleet left no witnesses, no story to spread fear or, more importantly, respect through the wider galaxy. A defeated, humiliated fleet, forced to surrender and report exactly what happened here, would serve humanity's purpose far better than silence ever could. One by one, disabled Dominion ships began broadcasting surrender signals as their weapons and engines were systematically knocked offline. Vol watched helplessly as ship after ship under his command went dark, not from destruction, but from forced submission. Word of the disaster reached the Coalition Assembly within hours, carried through emergency communication relays that Dominion Command had desperately activated once the scale of the disaster became clear. The message that finally reached Coalition leadership was almost impossible to believe. Not one, but all 3 Korvath fleets sent to crush the human frontier had been effectively neutralized in a single, coordinated engagement. In the Coalition Assembly Chamber, the same room where Daniel Reyes had stood only weeks earlier delivering his warning, delegates gathered in hurried, urgent sessions to discuss the reports. The mood was nothing like the amused, dismissive atmosphere of that earlier meeting. "This is not possible," said the same Threll elder who had mocked Rey's warning, his mandibles clicking rapidly with agitation. "The Korvath Dominion fields one of the most experienced militaries in this quadrant. 3 full fleets do not simply vanish." "And yet," replied a quieter voice from the Oven delegation, "our own intelligence confirms it. All 3 fleets, disabled or captured within a single engagement, inside a region previously logged as empty, abandoned space. Murmurs spread rapidly through the chamber as delegates began pulling up old recordings from Ray's earlier appearance, replaying his calm, quiet warning again and again. Words that had drawn laughter only weeks before now carried a very different weight. "We won't be asking again." No one was laughing now. Back in the Hollow Reach, Grand Marshal Vol stood in the dim emergency lighting of his crippled flagship, watching a small human shuttle approach through the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. He had spent his entire career studying tactics, commanding fleets, and winning campaigns across dozens of systems. Nothing in that experience had prepared him for the quiet, methodical defeat he had just suffered at the hands of a species his own reports had dismissed as primitive and disorganized. The shuttle docked without resistance, and a small group of human soldiers boarded his ship, weapons ready but not raised in aggression. Their leader, a calm officer with steady eyes, approached Vol directly. "Grand Marshal Threxa Vol," the officer said simply, "your fleet has been disabled. You are being offered the chance to surrender formally, or your remaining crew will be evacuated by force once we finish securing the wreckage around you." Vol studied the officer for a long moment, searching for any sign of arrogance or cruelty in his expression. He found none. Only quiet, disciplined confidence, the same kind of confidence Daniel Reyes had shown standing alone before an entire council of mocking delegates weeks earlier. For the first time in his long career, Vol lowered his weapon without argument. "Formal surrender is accepted," he said quietly, the words feeling strange and heavy in his mouth. Across the wreckage of the Hollow Reach, similar scenes played out aboard dozens of disabled Dominion vessels. Ships that had entered human space expecting an easy, one-sided slaughter now drifted silently under human control, their crews captured, their commanders humbled, and their once-feared reputation shattered in a single, carefully planned engagement. Far away, in the Coalition Assembly, delegates who had laughed at humanity's warning now sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence, slowly beginning to understand that the young, dismissed species they had mocked only weeks earlier had just rewritten the galaxy's understanding of what humanity truly was. News of the disaster spread through the Corveth Dominion homeworld like a slow, spreading fire, burning through military command structures, political offices, and public broadcasts alike. For generations, the Dominion had built its reputation on discipline, overwhelming force, and a long, unbroken record of successful campaigns against weaker species. That reputation now lay in ruins, shattered by a species most Dominion officials had never even considered a genuine threat. Inside the Dominion's high command chamber, a cold and imposing structure built from black volcanic stone, senior officials gathered in tense, urgent debate. Grand Marshal Vol's official surrender report had already been transmitted back to Dominion Command, along with testimony from surviving officers who had witnessed the Hollow Reach engagement firsthand. "3 full fleets," said High Overseer Draxel, the Dominion's most senior military official, his voice low and dangerous. "Not damaged, not delayed, neutralized entirely by a species we ourselves classified as having no meaningful military capability." No one in the chamber offered an easy explanation. Reports from surviving Corveth officers described the Hollow Reach engagement in careful, consistent detail. Hidden weapon platforms disguised as harmless debris, gravity disruption mines perfectly placed to cripple formations, and human stealth technology capable of completely evading Dominion sensors until the moment of attack. "This was not luck," said a younger tactical officer seated near the back of the chamber. "This was planned, precisely planned, likely years in advance." The realization settled uncomfortably over the room. Humanity, a species the Dominion had dismissed as young, disorganized, and incapable of coordinated resistance, had instead spent years quietly preparing an ambush specifically designed to counter Corveth military doctrine. It was not the desperate defense of a frightened, primitive species. It was the calculated strategy of a civilization that had been paying very close attention. Meanwhile, at the Coalition Assembly, the mood remained tense and uncertain as delegates struggled to process the shifting balance of power. Emergency sessions were called, one after another, as species across the galaxy demanded answers about what exactly had happened in the Hollow Reach and what it meant for the wider galactic community. Daniel Reyes was summoned back to the assembly, this time under very different circumstances. As he walked into the chamber once again, the atmosphere could not have felt more different from his first visit. There was no laughter this time, no dismissive glances or amused whispers. Delegates watched him with a mixture of caution, curiosity, and in some cases, quiet unease. The same council chairman who had dismissed his earlier warning now addressed him with noticeably more careful language. Ambassador Reyes, this council requests a full explanation of the events that took place within what your government refers to as the Hollow Reach. Reyes stood at the same platform where he had once been mocked, his expression calm and steady. As I stated during my previous appearance, he began, humanity formally warned this council of ongoing Corvath aggression against our colonies. That warning was dismissed. We were told, quite directly, that we lacked the strength and standing to be taken seriously. He paused, letting the memory settle over the room before continuing. When it became clear that this council would not intervene on our behalf, we made the decision to prepare our own defense, using every resource and every piece of intelligence available to us. The Hollow Reach was the result of that preparation. A Threll delegate near the front raised a limb hesitantly. You are saying this was planned, in advance, specifically to destroy Corvath forces. It was planned to defend our people, Reyes corrected calmly. The Corvath Dominion chose to escalate their aggression rather than de-escalate it, especially after this council publicly dismissed our concerns. That escalation led them directly into a defense system we had spent years developing specifically because we believed, correctly as it turned out, that no one else would step in to protect us. The Oven delegate who had once mocked him so casually now studied him with a far more careful expression. And what does humanity intend to do now, Ambassador Reyes, with this capability revealed? Reyes considered the question carefully before answering. Humanity does not seek galactic conquest. We do not wish to expand beyond our own territory or interfere with the affairs of other species. What we sought from the very beginning was simple: recognition, respect, and the right to defend what belongs to us without being laughed out of this chamber for asking. He let his gaze move slowly across the assembled delegates. We hoped this council would help protect that right through diplomacy. Since that path was closed to us, we protected it ourselves. If the Corvath Dominion, or any other power, chooses aggression against humanity again, we will respond the same way we responded this time. The chamber remained silent for a long moment, delegates exchanging uncertain glances as the full weight of his words settled over them. The species that had been dismissed as young, weak, and unimportant had just demonstrated a level of strategic patience and technological capability that few, if any, powers in the room could confidently claim to match. The council chairman finally broke the silence. This council will take your statement under advisement, Ambassador Reyes. Given recent events, several delegations have proposed reviewing humanity's current standing within this assembly, including discussions regarding formal military recognition. Reyes nodded once, calm and composed. Humanity welcomes that discussion whenever this council is ready to have it seriously. As he turned to leave the chamber for the second time, there was no laughter behind him this time. Only quiet, careful murmurs and the unmistakable sound of an entire galaxy slowly, uncomfortably, beginning to reconsider everything it thought it understood about the small, stubborn species called humanity. Months passed before the full consequences of the Hollow Reach engagement settled fully across the galaxy, But by the time they did, very little about humanity's place in the wider community remained the same. What had once been quiet dismissal turned slowly into careful, deliberate respect, though not without considerable debate, hesitation, and in some quarters, lingering resentment. The Coalition Assembly, after weeks of tense internal negotiation, formally extended humanity a permanent seat on the Council, an honor no species so young had ever received before. The decision did not come easily. Several delegations argued strongly against it, worried about the precedent of rewarding a species for what they still privately viewed as an act of dangerous, calculated aggression. Others argued the opposite, pointing out that humanity had exhausted every diplomatic option available before acting, and that punishing them now would only teach every young species watching that peaceful warnings meant nothing. In the end, practicality outweighed pride. No delegation wanted to risk provoking a species capable of neutralizing 3 full battle fleets through patient, hidden preparation. Better, many quietly reasoned, to have humanity seated at the table as a cautious ally than left outside it as an unpredictable threat. Daniel Reyes attended the formal seating ceremony without any particular sense of triumph. He stood quietly among representatives of species far older, and in many ways, still far more powerful than humanity, accepting the new seat with the same calm composure he had carried through every difficult meeting before it. There were no bitter remarks about the laughter he had endured months earlier, no reminders of how differently this same chamber had treated him the first time he stood before it. He simply took his place, ready to work. The Korvath Dominion, meanwhile, faced consequences far harsher than simple embarrassment. Stripped of a significant portion of its military strength and forced into a humiliating peace agreement, the once feared empire found its influence rapidly declining among other aggressive factions who had previously respected its power. Smaller rival states that had once feared Dominion aggression began testing old border disputes, sensing weakness where there had once been unquestioned strength. High Overseer Draxil, forced to sign the peace agreement personally, understood clearly that the Dominion's reputation, carefully built over generations, had been badly damaged by a single, avoidable mistake, underestimating an opponent they never bothered to fully understand. Grand Marshal Vall, stripped of his rank and quietly retired from active service, spent the following month studying recordings of the Hollow Reach engagement obtained through the peace negotiations. He watched, again and again, the precise, disciplined way human forces had disabled his fleet rather than destroying it outright, the careful restraint shown even in total victory. It was a lesson he had learned too late to save his career, but one he suspected the rest of the galaxy would spend a very long time studying. Elsewhere, humanity's standing continued shifting in smaller, quieter ways. Trade delegations that had once ignored human representatives began requesting formal meetings. Smaller species along contested border regions, long fearful of larger predatory empires, began quietly approaching Earth's diplomatic corps, hopping to establish defensive partnerships. Even the Threll and Oven delegations who had mocked Reyes so openly during his first appearance began treating human representatives with careful, measured respect, though old habits of superiority occasionally resurfaced in smaller, subtler ways. Back on Earth, life continued largely as it always had for most ordinary citizens, unaware of just how close their frontier colonies had come to complete destruction, or how carefully their government had prepared to prevent it. Only a small circle of officials, engineers, and military leaders truly understood the full scope of what had happened in the Hollow Reach, and most of them preferred it stay that way. There was no parade, no grand celebration. Only quiet, steady work continuing behind closed doors, preparing for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring next. Grace Holloway, the engineer who had spent a decade designing the Hollow Reach's hidden defenses, returned to her research facility shortly after the crisis ended, already turning her attention toward new projects. She rarely spoke publicly about what she had built, content instead to let the results speak quietly for themselves. Daniel Reyes, for his part, found himself reflecting often on the strange, uncomfortable path that had led humanity to this point. He had never wanted a reputation built on fear or military strength. He had hoped, quite simply, that words alone might have been enough to protect his people. The galaxy's laughter that day had taught him otherwise, and he carried that lesson carefully with him into every meeting that followed. Late one evening, long after the formal seating ceremony had ended, Reyes found himself alone aboard a small transport ship, passing near the edge of what remained of the hollow reach on his way back toward Earth. The region remained quiet now, its hidden weapon platforms deactivated, its purpose already fulfilled. Scattered wreckage still drifted silently among the asteroids, faint reminders of the battle that had taken place there months earlier. He stood by the viewport for a long moment, watching the debris drift slowly past in the darkness. It was not a place of celebration. It was simply a quiet, distant monument to a warning the galaxy had once refused to take seriously, and the moment everything changed because of it. Humanity had not sought this reputation. It had not wanted to be feared or admired or seated among the powerful for reasons rooted in violence rather than cooperation. But the galaxy had left them very few other paths to be heard, and now, finally, it was listening. As his ship continued on toward home, Reyes allowed himself a small, quiet breath of relief, knowing that whatever challenges still waited ahead, humanity would face them not as an ignored, dismissed species standing alone in a crowded chamber, but as an equal, finally given the respect it had always simply asked for from the very beginning.